The Superman trailer dropped not too long ago, and it was absolutely amazing. So let's get into a bunch of Easter eggs and things we missed from the YouTube channel Screen Crush. Appreciate you guys for stepping in. Let's get into it.
You have a dog?
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the first full trailer for Superman. I admit it, I've already cried a couple of times watching this trailer. I mean, you guys know how much I love this character. He is my favorite superhero, and this trailer is filled with little details that show how writer-director James Gunn really understands the essence of who Superman is.
I love the trailer. You can go check out my reaction if you want to, but I'll put the link to my reaction in the description of this video if you want to check it out.
You ready, Doug? Let's break this baby down.
I am ready.
We start with the DC Studios logo. Now remember, Superman is the first non-documentary feature film of James Gunn's new DCU. This is a kind of reboot of the old DCEU, with Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom being the last official film of that franchise. But we've already seen a few entries into this new universe. Creature Commandos was the first formal introduction to this world, and Peacemaker Season 2 is also set in this universe, which also means that aspects of the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1 are also a part of this new canon. But James Gunn doesn't want us to get too worried about continuity or following the entire franchise. He just wants to tell one good story at a time. For instance, they just wrapped filming the Supergirl film before they've even started filming Batman Brave and the Bold, because, Gunn said, the script for Supergirl was ready, but Batman's not ready yet. That is in contrast to Marvel Studios, who pretty often start making films and shows before they have a finished script, and so they end up reshooting much of the film afterwards, which is how we got this.
Give me your gun, goddammit.
We begin on the skyline of Metropolis. Note the Luthor Corps tower in the background. This is the company, of course, that's headed by Lex Luthor. Now, it's important that this is called Luthor Corps and not Lex Corps. Like we saw in the show Smallville, in the early days, the company was called Luthor Corps, but Lex later changed it to highlight his own name over his father's. Now, much of this...
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. It's always been LexCorp every time I've always seen it, but that's interesting, see?
Movie is going to be based on 3 different Superman comics. All-Star Superman, which is about Superman dying from sun poisoning, and also Superman for All Seasons and Superman Birthright. And those are both kind of a retelling of Superman's first year. So it makes sense that this would still be called Luthor Corps, and it establishes that in this universe, Superman hasn't been around for very long. Now, Lois already knows Clark's secret identity, just like in the comics, and they are in a relationship. He has just decided to give her an exclusive interview with Superman, which Christopher Reeve's Superman also did in the original 1978 film.
I never lie.
Interestingly enough, though, when they rebooted Superman in the 1980s comics, Clark landed his Daily Planet job by getting his own exclusive interview with Superman. Notice that her recorder is made by Lord Tech, a corporation owned by Max Lord. Now, we have already seen Lord portrayed in the DCEU by Pedro Pascal in Wonder Woman 1984. And in the recent Peacemaker Season 2 trailer, we saw that he is now being played by Sean Gunn, brother of James Gunn. That trailer also revealed that the new Justice...
I still haven't watched the Peacemaker 2 trailer.
League is not technically the League, but the Justice Gang, and it's actually being owned and run by Lord Tech, just like how in the comics Maxwell Lord ran the team Justice League International. Now, there's actually a few more reveals about Lord Tech and the Justice Gang hidden throughout this trailer that I'm going to talk about as we go along. During their interview, notice the Daily Planet mug on the table, and on the right here we see Lois written in skywriting, making me think that Clark must have done this for her as a nice gesture. Now, as they talk about Superman's last controversial mission, we see cutaways to damage from a recent battle. Now, look, we're going to do our best to speculate on what all of this means in the movie, but I'm not going to get too hung up on figuring out the exact plot step by step. Right. I don't know about you, but I'd like to be a little bit surprised. But
it's a trailer. People get too caught up in it, think they understand exactly what's going on, what the story's about, and then they make judgment calls without watching the movie. Then they find out it's nothing what you thought it was. It is a trailer, people. You have to remember that.
Here, we do see what looks like a ship of Kryptonian origin. Now, in the great comic book Superman Birthright that I mentioned earlier, Lex Luthor gets images of Krypton's history, but then he broadcasts them across Earth to show people Kryptonian warships, and then he claims that Superman is actually an advanced alien scout, and this turns the public against him, like we see in this trailer. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing something similar happen here. The kaiju that Superman fights later might be from Superman's Kryptonian zoo, and Lex would have gotten access to that zoo from all of those Kryptonian images after he invades the Fortress of Solitude that we see later in the trailer. And notice here we see a sign for Stagg Industries. This is an evil corporation in the comics run by Simon Stagg. He is responsible for the accident that turned Rex Mason into the hero Metamorpho. Now, we do see him later in the trailer, played by Anthony Carrigan. He has the power to change shape, but he can never
Metamorpho looks awesome in this movie.
change back into his human form. Now, in the comics, Metamorpho actually seeks out the help of the Justice League to help him return to normal, but they didn't succeed, so he turned down their offer to join the team. Now then, as we talk about this new controversy surrounding Superman, we see a God's eye view of the Pentagon, and I think this is a deliberate choice because this is how Superman would see the Pentagon from the air. It also highlights how he feels like he is above the normal constraints when it comes to things like invading other countries. Now, as she mentions the Secretary of Defense, we cut to Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr. Now, we first met this guy's son, Rick Flag Jr., as the commander of the Suicide Squad in both of those movies. But the second Suicide Squad movie is quasi-canon to this universe. In Creature Commandos, they actually mentioned that Flag's son died in Corto Maltese, like we saw in that film. Andrew?
I was going to say that with the whole Creature Commandos thing, because I remember them saying that.
Remember, his son was killed by Peacemaker, which is why we see Rick Flag Sr. hunting him down in the Peacemaker Season 2 trailer. Now, in that trailer, we also hear that he is the new head of Argus, the organization that runs the Suicide Squad and Creature Commandos. Now, we don't know if he has that position yet in this movie, but it could be that the events of this film are what lead to him getting that promotion. After the events of Creature Commandos, Flag seems to be the top guy for reining in people with superpowers, which is why they have him going after Superman. Also, I should note that every actor who voices an animated character in the DCU will also play them in live action. But in Creature Commandos, you notice Flag Sr. had white hair. James Gunn recently confirmed in an interview with Collider that he actually dyed his hair because Flag is a vain man. And also, Frank Grillo had shooting conflicts. Superman is under fire because he intervened in another country called Baravia. Now, this is taken straight from the 1939 comic Superman issue 1, where he did the same thing. But Superman has also unilaterally invaded other countries before several times in the comics. For instance, in the late 80s, he led a unilateral action against the fictional country of Karak and suffered similar blowback from the government. Then we see an overhead shot of this battlefield where the country of Jarnpar is invading Baravia. And we actually know the name of that country from the article that Clark is holding in this newspaper that we saw in the previous trailer. This article also talks about someone called the Hammer of Baravia, who is the guy in the suit that Superman fights later. And also in Creature Commandos, we learned that Flag was once stationed in this country.
Rick Flag. He and I fought together in Jahanpur some months ago.
Now in this shot, we see the invading army has high-tech gear and high-tech tanks, and they're facing off against civilians who are just running away from them and are unarmed. So from what we can gather here, this country launched an attack on this nation that was underdeveloped, and they would have slaughtered civilians if Superman hadn't intervened. And even though this caused an international stir, Clark has a good reason for helping.
People were going to die!
Now, we have a theory about what actually caused this conflict that we're going to talk about a little later in the video. Now, in this wide shot of the Daily Planet newsroom, we think everybody is watching Superman's rescue of Baravia play out live. Here we see Jimmy Olsen, Superman's best pal, played by Skylar Gisondo, Kat Grant, a fashion writer and love interest of Jimmy Olsen's, played by Michaela Hoover.
I never knew Jimmy Olsen had a love interest. Like I said, I never read any Superman comics. And even the Superman animated series, I watched a couple episodes. Like I said, I'm a Batman guy. So my most exposure with Superman as far as animated content goes comes from the Justice League animated shows and the Superman animated movies. I think I've watched every Superman animated movie. Pretty sure I've seen every one DC's put out. I don't remember in any of those Jimmy Olsen having a love interest, though, at least that I've seen.
This is reporter Ron Troop, played by Christopher McDonald, and Beck Bennett as sports reporter Steve Lombardo. Now, right here, as we see Flag and Ultraman arresting Superman, notice we see Wade Street in the background. This is named after the great Mark Waid, who wrote Superman Birthright and the comic book Kingdom Come, the comic book where the new S on Superman's suit made its debut.
Hey, wait a minute, slow down. Who's Ultraman?
So this is a little bit of the mystery in this movie. In the comics, Ultraman is an evil version of Superman from Earth 3.
Oh, person, please, no more multiverse.
Well, there might be some multiverse in Peacemaker.
I said please.
No, look, I don't think there's multiverse in this movie. In the movie, it looks like Ultraman is working for Lex Luthor, so he could be a clone of Superman like Bizarro was in the comics. This would also be similar to Homelander and Black Noir in the comic book The Boys. In the comic books, Black Noir was secretly a clone of Homelander who Vought kept around in case the big big guy ever went rogue. And this woman is the engineer, and she is from a team called the Authority, a group of anti-heroes, and James Gunn confirmed that they are going to get their own movie. Her power is basically nanotech to create any machine or object that she wants.
Thank you for everybody in the comment section of other videos that tell me about the engineer, because I had no idea who she was, and I've never heard of this superhero team that she's on, these anti-heroes. But I figured she was using that nanotech based on what I saw, how it just like...
version of the engineer, Angela Spica, is the second to hold the mantle. She was a lover of superheroes and a child genius who later gets infused with the nanotechnology of the original engineer, enhancing her and giving her the same technopathic and mechanical shape-shifting powers. Now, there's a lot more to her than that, but the main point is she and Ultraman are working for Lex Luthor. Clark starts to get upset that Lois is acting like an actual reporter, and this does a great job of showing their dynamic. Lois Lane is a fearless reporter, a Pulitzer Prize winner, so she wouldn't throw a softball to anyone, not even to her demigod boyfriend.
In effect, you illegally entered a country.
Now, I will say that the movie Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice also tried to address these same issues. We saw people protesting Superman, Congress held hearings on him, and there were some beautiful shots of him helping people out around the world. But in that movie, that controversy ultimately played a really small role. Yes. Whereas in this film, public opinion...
Yes, I love BVS. I love that movie. But I would be lying if I wasn't... If I didn't say that I love how they challenged that idea. I love that. I just think it wasn't executed the best, and it kind of fell flat. But I love the idea. That was something different that we hadn't really gotten in a superhero movie. But I just don't think it was executed the best.
Opinion is weaponized by Lex Luthor to use against the Man of Steel. Then we see what I think is part of the kaiju fight that gets Superman arrested, with these buildings falling in a kind of domino effect. And we think this could also be symbolic. Superman appearing on Earth started a chain of events with aliens and Lex Luthor rising up to challenge him. As Superman enters this global stage, the reactions to him will get more and more severe and cause more destruction. So since Superman saves this little girl, and you'll notice how her costume and frankly everybody's clothes in this movie are deliberately made to look like how characters are drawn in the comics. Gunn is a massive fan of DC Comics, and he wants this film to feel authentic to the Superman that we got on the page. Notice here we see Ross Street, probably a nod to Clark's boyhood friend Pete Ross, and a poster for the Metropolis baseball team, the Meteors. And then, this is interesting, the Hammer of Baravia that we saw earlier is attacking offices owned by Maxwell Lord, you know, the guy who owns the Justice Gang. Now, the Hammer's armor is green and purple and looks a lot like Lex Luthor's armor from the comics. So we're wondering, did Lex Luthor actually build this armor for the people of Baravia? Did he supply both sides in this war just to reap profits, or to cause an international incident where he knew that Superman would intervene?
That's some Lex Luthor type stuff right there.
Love the idea of Lex Luthor being a master manipulator who can drive world events to cause Superman to act in careless ways. Also, he could take away Superman's true power, his public support, because
he was a master manipulator in BVS, but again, it was executed poorly, and then some things just didn't make sense.
Ultimately, Lex Luthor is jealous of Superman. Also notice these flying drones around him that we see all throughout the trailer. So we think these are flying cameras built by Lex Luthor, so they can record every moment of the battle and then spin the conflict to make it look like Superman was in the wrong. Now, when he's knocked down, notice this light from the camera glare. It is one of many incredibly rich details in this trailer that we are going to point out as we go along. He lands near the Metropolis Museum of Art, appropriately in front of Moore Street. This is named after Alan Moore, one of the all-time greatest comic book writers who have ever lived. He also wrote two of the all-time best Superman stories, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow and What Do You Get for the Man Who Has Everything. I love this part where people gather around to help him. Now, ordinary civilians helping superheroes was of course popularized in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, but this all actually started back in Superman 2 when the people of Metropolis thought that Superman was dead and they go to face off against Zod. And I love pointing out this guy in the sailor outfit grabbing a road cone. And Superman of course gets right back up, and here I want to point out what the author Glenn Weldon said about Superman in his unauthorized biography of the character. He said Superman can be defined by two traits. He always does the right thing, and he never gives up. And when he tells his opponent,
Hey, buddy, eyes up here.
It plays into the tagline of the movie, Look Up. But also, notice how the camera can't quite keep up with Superman, and it lags behind him for a few frames. And we see this happen another time later in the trailer. The font of the title screen is lifted directly from Superman 78, and we hear a reorchestration of the score. And then we see the Fortress of Solitude growing out of the ice in crystalline form.
I love their Fortress of Solitude take. It's genius.
Just like in the original Richard Donner franchise, Lex Luthor invades the Fortress of Solitude, just like in Superman 2, and he is being guarded by the Engineer and Ultraman, and this woman behind them is Miss Eve Taskmacher. She, of course, was Lex's sidekick in Superman 1, and we also see her taking a selfie in front of a battle later on. Now, the selfie, to me, indicates that Lex is the one who's behind this attack because she knows she is not in any danger. So Eve Taskmaster is played by Sarah Sampaio, and she is sort of an anti-Lois Lane. She said about the character, Lex wants to take down Superman, and I'm just happy that my boyfriend is rich and takes me to all these places. We see the Engineer slice through Superman's robots. Now, they are based on designs by Frank Quietly for the comic book All-Star Superman. They're voiced by Alan Tudyk, Grace Chan, and Michael Rooker, who has appeared in every James Gunn film. And of course, they're all being guarded by Krypto, the bestest boy in the world. And remember, the first trailer showed Krypto rescue Superman, and the sneak peek showed the robots bombarding him with sunlight to heal him. So it wouldn't surprise me if Superman is actually incapacitated during this scene. And then we see Superman in a glass cage, the same cage where he meets Metamorpho later in this trailer. Now, we actually think this is a prison operated by Lex Luthor, maybe by using Phantom Zone technology that he steals from the Fortress of Solitude.
Or what's the Phantom Zone?
Well, the Phantom Zone is a prison in another dimension where Kryptonians sent their prisoners, and we think it's run by Lex Luthor because later in the trailer we see these guards with LC on their chests for Luthor Corps. In the cell next to Superman, this looks like another member of the Justice Gang, Mr. Terrific. So it seems to me like the government is regulating superhumans and locking them up in this Phantom Zone prison. As Superman saves this woman from a kaiju, we see an ad for Big Belly Burger, a fast food chain from the comics, and CW's TV shows. There's also an ad here for a show called 8, which could be a spin on the musical 9. And on the screen here, we see a news report about major floods. And we think these floods resulted from a monster approaching the city underground. We see evidence of this later in the trailer with this gash cut into the water leading to the shoreline. Then there's this cryptic shot of Superman watching a fight outside this window with Lois next to him. Notice, in the distance, we can actually see Guy Gardner fighting this monster, as noted by this green beam forming a shield. Now, in this trailer, we see 3 members of Max Lord's Justice Gang. Guy Gardner, played by Nathan Fillion. Now, he is a Green Lantern who's also a giant jerk, and he's like so much fun to read in the comics. Later in the trailer, we actually see him dismiss soldiers with a wave of his hand, creating a giant green hand to swat them away. There's also Hawkgirl, played by Isabella Merced, fresh off the smash hit Madam Web, which has skyrocketed her career.
She was in Madam Web? I had no idea. Well, because I never seen the movie, and I will never watch that movie. My first time seeing her was in The Last of Us Season 2. She's gorgeous.
She's also Dina in The Last of Us. And later in the trailer, we actually think this is her attacking Lex Luthor, but I could be wrong about that. And there's Mr. Terrific, played by Edie Gathegi. Now, Mr. Terrific, aka Michael Holt, is DC's 3rd smartest character and the 2nd iteration of the character. Terrific is not only a brilliant inventor, but he's also an Olympic decathlete, and he uses his T-spheres, the small balls that we see later on, to fight. They can create lasers, holographs, and allow him to fly. And we think that we see him in this lower right-hand corner fighting this monster as well by shooting red laser beams at him.
But why isn't Superman fighting?
Well, maybe he's not allowed to. Later in the trailer, we do see another headline that reads, "New regulations to start next week." So maybe superheroes like Superman all have to be registered agents of the government. Registered agents that wealthy men like Lex Luthor and Maxwell Lord can control. And then we see flashes of Clark's childhood, growing up on a contemporary-looking campus.
That's another thing. People were getting mad. This isn't Superman. He's sitting there hugging Lois, and there's a monster in the background. I was like, it's a trailer. There is a lot of context missing. Let's watch the movie before we come to these solid conclusions. I'm sure there is reasoning behind this. Come on, man. Have some faith.
Kansas farm. James Gunn even said that this is inspired by the converted trailer where he grew up. And James, I can relate. I too grew up in a trailer in the long, long ago in the distant past before I found myself in this store eternally trapped at the end of time and space.
Person, get back on track.
Sorry, Mr. Terrific exits this craft, and we think this is on Baravia. Notice Lois Lane is behind him because she would never leave a good story behind. He is attacking these troops who are wearing purple and green, which again are the colors of the Lex bots in the comics, making us think that Lex is definitely supplying weapons in this this war. Alternately, this could be them entering the Phantom Zone prison, which ties into a shot that we see later in the trailer. Next, we see Lex in the Fortress of Solitude, stealing Kryptonian secrets, just like he did in Superman 2. Also notice the memory crystals in the console, just like in the Donner Superman movies, and we see the language Kryptonese on the monitor, just like how it's written in the comics. Then he expresses his jealousy, saying,
"Somehow become the focal point of the entire world's conversation."
Which is funny because Lex Luthor actor Nicholas Hoult auditioned to play both Superman and Batman. Now the Kents are nursing Clark back to health in his old room. Notice this vintage alarm clock and this chessboard. Now we've seen Superman play a couple of significant chess battles in the comics. In the comic Injustice Gods Among Us and in its film adaptation. In both instances, the chess game is used as a metaphor for a moral debate between two heroes. How far is too far when it comes to delivering justice? And in both games, Clark loses. In the film adaptation, Clark plays the game against Mr. Terrific, so we might see them have a similar conflict in this film. I also think it's important to note that Superman is rocking some 5 o'clock shadow. Now traditionally, Superman kept a close shave using his heat vision and a mirror, but more recent comics have allowed him to have some scruff, and he even left Earth and grew a full beard when he exiled himself off-world. A bearded Superman is a more human Superman, which explains why he's rocking facial hair in the most humanizing series, Superman and Lois. And then we see Superman rising from the ashes in this incredibly gorgeous shot. Lex insists that Superman be called an it.
He's not a man. He's an it.
And I think we're actually going to see a pretty plain allegory in this movie. Superman was created by the son of two Jewish immigrants, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and their families, like Superman, survived a Holocaust. Superman has always been an allegory for immigration and the American dream, and in this trailer we see him struggling to fit into this new world. Next we see Superman and Mr. Terrific fighting the Engineer in Metropolis Meteor Stadium. And remember, in Superman Returns, this is where Superman stopped.
I love that scene. And Superman Returns. That whole aircraft scene, saving it, underrated scene. That scene is awesome. Awesome. It captures Superman's speed, his power, just everything, man. He used X-ray vision in that, man. It was, yes, love that scene.
Stop the plane from crashing. In the background, we see the name Sorrel, named after the lead graphic designer on this film. Back at the Kent's home, his mom says,
"I cleaned your boots. I'll go get them for you."
So in the comics, Martha sewed Clark's original cape from the blanket that he was wrapped in the rocket ship. But over the years, this evolved to her just weaving his suit from normal fabric that was protected by an energy field that surrounded Clark's skin. But this idea of her making the suit has persisted, and we even got an awesome mention of it in the pilot of Superman and Lois.
Cool costume.
Thanks. My mom made it for me.
In the Daily Planet office, notice Jimmy has a little Superman poster, and it seems like Clark has a Superman action figure on his bulletin board. Then we see a brief shot of the Fortress robots helping Clark with the yellow rays of the sun, with a few quick cut shots. Superman and Lois kissing in the Daily Planet lobby, another shot where the camera has trouble keeping up with Superman, and then we see this awesome shot of the Engineer's nanobots attacking Superman with the camera inverted and twisting to give the bots this kind of crawling, inhuman, unsettling feel. And this shot is like super weird. We see Lois and Mr. Terrific exiting his T-ship. Now, I think this is the two of them arriving in the Phantom Zone to save Superman. That would explain how all this wreckage can float around them. And then we see the crowd following the movie's tagline, "Look up." And this trailer really does tell a whole story. People begin the trailer looking down on Superman, literally and metaphorically, and they end it by looking up. And at the button at the end of the trailer...
I didn't see. This is why I watch these videos. I would have never caught that. That's awesome. That's a beautiful touch.
Lois says,
You have a dog?
So canonically, Lois doesn't like Krypto. In Superman issue 168, she admits to hating him after he eats the meal that she made for her and Clark. Also, in Clark's boyhood home, we see the Smallville Giants pennant, the same local team from the comics, and Clark actually played for them in high school. Now, his bedroom is a little messy, just like how it appeared in Superman for All Seasons. Here we see a poster for the Mighty Crab Toys, a fake rock band that has already appeared 3 times in the DCU. Frankenstein wore a Crabjoy shirt in Creature Commandos, and they also had a billboard in the Season 2 trailer for Peacemaker.
But why are they in everything?
Well, that's actually a fun CW Easter egg. If you look closely, the lead singer of the band might look familiar. That's your mom. I should also note that Clark, in the comics, is a metalhead. In Superboy issue 83, he admits to Superboy that he has every Metallica CD.
I thought you said he was a metalhead. Slayer!
All right, well, that's all the Easter eggs that we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Threads, or on our free-to-join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.
Thank you. Hey, there's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't know, I didn't catch, or I didn't have context and understanding for. So that's why I like watching these videos. The breakdowns are great, and they give you a little bit of a history lesson. These directors and producers and people, they put a lot of thought and effort in filling out this world, fleshing out this world with a lot of lore, a lot of Easter eggs, and it's really genius how they do things. Like, there's nothing in a movie scene that doesn't have deeper meaning than what you might think it has on its surface. And I watch a lot of YouTube videos and things like that, so I've started to learn that years ago. And I was like, man, I just thought this was a regular scene and just a room. And it's like, nope, that clock has meaning. That clock is in a very specific position for a reason. That lamp's in a very specific position for a reason. It's facing that way for a reason. And that sign there is an actual Easter egg, and it's there for a reason. It's like, man, there's just so much thought that goes into these films. But this was good. I needed to watch this, and this gives me some more understanding about some Superman history and kind of, like what's going on and what things could possibly be. It's interesting. So shout out to Screen Rush, man. That was awesome. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section, folks, but that's all I got to say about it. Super excited for this movie. That's about it. That's a wrap for today's episode. I appreciate each and every one of you for stepping in, showing your love, showing your support, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Now, I could sit here and smack you all around with the generic like, comment, subscribe BS, but nobody gives a damn about that. So do whatever the hell you want to do, because you're going to do it anyway. Now, I'm going to give you to the count of 10 to get your ugly, yellow, no good keister off my property before I pump your guts full of lead. I am Boo, and I am out.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.